Alright, so the last movie in my January 2018 plan, although it's no longer January, to talk about movies that are getting continuations this year is Wreck-It Ralph. I'm gonna wreck it! So Wreck-It Ralph is a Disney animated movie that came out in November 2012, a little over 5 years ago. Jeez, it's been that long already. It takes place in an arcade that's like Toy Story, where when the arcade closes down, the characters and all the video games in the arcade, they come to life and they have lives of their own. And I love how this world works. It's so genius how some of these things are explained. Like the characters can leave their games through the wires on these little trams and they go to the power strip. The power strip is like this big Game Central station. That to me is just so genius. So one of the games in this arcade is an old 80s game called Fix-It Felix Jr. And the bad guy of that game is our main character here, Wreck-It Ralph. He pounds on the building and bricks fall down and the player plays as Fix-It Felix and he fixes the building and he goes up. That's how the game is played and they've been doing that for 30 years. But Wreck-It Ralph, voiced by John C. Reilly, doesn't get a lot of respect for doing his job because he is the bad guy. So he's like, I don't want to be the villain anymore. He wants to go to other games and try to prove himself. He wants to prove that he might be a bad guy, but that doesn't mean he's a bad guy. So that's what this movie's about. He goes on his journey of self-discovery. He meets other characters from other games and now we have our great Disney movie. And yeah, it is really good. I mean, one thing everyone loves about this movie is that it actually makes references to real video games that exist in our world, which is just fantastic. Like one of the first scenes in this movie is this little bad guys anonymous meeting, and you see characters like Bowser sitting next to Dr. Eggman from the Sonic games. I'm like, wow, a Disney movie bringing characters from Nintendo and Sega together. I remember when I first saw the trailer for this movie, I was like, holy shit. And yeah, there are tons and tons of references to all kinds of video games in this movie. But that's not all the movie is. It is actually a real focused movie about the main character. So Ralph ends up in another one of the games in the arcade. It's called Sugar Rush. It's a newer game. It's a racing game, which I love playing in arcades. You know when you're in an arcade and you're playing one of those racing games, you actually get on the real motorcycle thing and you lean side to side. I used to love those games. Sugar Rush is one of those games. So Ralph meets this little girl in the game. Her name is Vanellope von Schweetz, voiced by Sarah Silverman, who some people found annoying. I didn't really find her annoying. In fact, I found her pretty funny. And they, like in all other Disney animated movies, they have their banter back and forth. I always say this about Disney animated movies because it is in all Disney animated movies. The two main characters, they don't get along at first, and then they do, then they don't, then they do. How many times can I say that in Disney animated movie reviews before it starts getting repetitive? But again, it works, because you really like both characters. Vanellope is kind of going through something similar to what Ralph was going through. No one really likes her in her game because she is actually a glitch. Which again, I like how that's explained in this world. She is a glitch. Kind of like how Missing No was a glitch in the old Pokemon games. Same kind of deal here. So she and Ralph help each other out for mutual gain. But since Ralph left his game, everyone else back in Fix-It Felix Jr. is just trying to cope with the fact that, hey, Ralph is gone. That's not good news. People are going to think the game is glitching out, so the arcade puts it out of order. So the good guy from the game, Fix-It Felix, voiced by Jack McBrayer, goes off to find Ralph. And there's another game in this arcade, it's called Hero's Duty, which is one of those arcade games where you take the gun and shoot at the screen. I was never a huge fan of those games, but when Felix looks for Ralph in Hero's Duty, he meets Sergeant Calhoun, voiced by Jane Lynch. Jane Lynch of all people, and if you watched Glee, you'll know exactly who she is. You recognize her voice instantly, you're like, that is Sue Sylvester. I mean, the character even looks like Jane Lynch. In fact, all four main characters in this movie look like their respective voice actors. But anyways, Fix-It Felix and Sergeant Calhoun, they go to Sugar Rush to look for Ralph, and the movie goes on from there. And then there's King Candy, who is the ruler of Sugar Rush, voiced by Alan Tudyk. And this is actually the first Disney animated movie where Alan Tudyk voiced one of the characters. Every Disney animated movie from then on had Alan Tudyk as voice. It's like Alan Tudyk is to Disney animation what John Ratzenberger is for Pixar. And it started here in this movie. Now I'm a big fan of this movie, don't get me wrong, but one thing that has me groaning a few times is the humor. Most of the humor is pretty fun, but some of the things I'm like, didn't really have to be in the movie. It kind of fell flat. Like Fix-It Felix and Sergeant Calhoun kind of developed this romance, kind of. I don't really buy it personally. I mean, I get that it's just there to be funny because he's like half her size. And it is kind of funny, but at the same time, I'm like, why did that have to be in the movie? They could have formed a bond without forming a romance. It's not a huge part of the movie, I'm just saying though. But then when this movie wants to hit you with something really emotional, it works. I'm not gonna spoil it, but yeah, you do end up really caring about the characters, and Vanellope in particular. You really want her to achieve her goal because you're like, it's not your fault, kiddo. You were just dealt a bad hand. It's really easy to be sympathetic for her, probably because she's just this adorable little kid. You want to give her a hug, you're like, everything's gonna be okay. Then you catch yourself, you're like, the movie's getting to me. Also, the music in Wreck-It Ralph is really good. Henry Jackman did the score, and yeah, as you would expect, it's all video game-esque kind of stuff. You know, there's 8-bit stuff, video game sound effects in the score, and like for different games, they have their own different kind of scores. I think the music for Hero's Duty was done by Skrillex. It's all like dubstep, and Sugar Rush's music is like J-pop. It fits really well. You're like, yeah, that is exactly the kind of music that would be in these games. Again, it's just genius. In the end, Wreck-It Ralph was one of my favorite movies of 2012. You love the characters, you love the world, and its whole explanation for how this arcade works. Some of the humor fell flat for me, but it's not enough to bring the movie down at all. I mean, some of the other humor in this movie still has me laughing. The music is fantastic. If you like video games, you'll like this movie, although I'm curious, if you don't like video games, you still might like this movie. I'm not huge on gaming, I'm not like a hardcore gamer, although I am a hardcore Super Smash Bros. Fan. But I don't feel like you had to be huge on gaming to love this movie. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it yet, and I'm definitely looking forward to its sequel. I just can't imagine all the further expansion the internet's gonna bring to this world. So Wreck-It Ralph, have you seen it? What did you think about it? And are you looking forward to its sequel? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.